What's going on? We're back here with a Pikmin 4 for what may be a side episode. I'm not quite 100% sure yet because I don't really know what this OLIMAR side thing is going to be. It said 30 ship parts, so are we just going to be playing through Pikmin 1 again, but like in this game's engine? Because that would be so freaking cool. But I've got some notes first. Depending on how much that actually yields, like if that ends up giving us like more important lore or story progress or something, I might count it as a main episode, or this might just be a side episode where it's just we're just doing some OLIMAR stuff. I recently was reminded of a song we always used to sing in my household at the end of the day theme, because usually at the end of the day you'd be like counting all the deaths of your Pikmin, so it's all like I remember we always used to sing it as they trusted you with their lives, they trusted you and they died. And I just had to share that with you because, man, it cracked me up. I thought about it again. So I'm probably gonna have to remember to sing that once or twice when we end a day in the future. Man, I can't wait to see the next area we get. But that'll have to wait till we do OLIMAR's thing anyway, because I really want to be hype and do that. So I had the thought that in this next area we've been to, didn't OLIMAR say earlier these castaways must have been in a place that neither I nor the rescue corps had gotten to? So he won't have any logs for us for this place. Very interesting. So we might be flying blind for a lot of it. Right, it's worth checking next time we're in a cave if you can do the flashbang with only one glowman, because that's an amazingly powerful offensive technique that if you only needed to use one glowman on it, then you could, they're called glow Pikmin, I always just shortened to glowman. That would be crazy useful to just get you a bit of extra offense. Like that, and then plus ice Pikmin in a cave, you'd be unstoppable. Gotta keep that in mind. And another note is that I noticed that whilst icy enemies are in proximity to other enemies, they actually freeze the other enemies for you. That happened during one of our night expeditions, and I didn't notice it at the time, but I noticed it whilst I was editing. Very good. So what I want to start with doing is just reading all of the Piccolopedia and treasure entries from Olimar's perspective, which will probably take us a very long time. It'll be a good time, and I think moving henceforth, I'd like to read Olimar's notes for everything new as we get it. Right, so starting from the top. Universal Rubber Cutie, we're going to be in here for a while, folks. The first time I laid eyes... I'm not going to do his voice because that'll hurt my throat to do it that long. The first time I laid eyes on this treasure, I thought it was a giant aquatic monster. It took me a few paralyzing seconds to realize that it's just a statue. What a relief. If such an attractive creature were to attack me, I'd be too entranced to run away. He says something similar in Pikmin 2, I think. But at that point, they were still calling these things ugly, and I guess they just changed it because that's not very wholesome and not teaching the kids good things. So I think he says something different like... If such an abhorrent creature were to attack me, I'd be too disgusted to run away. Planetary Rubber Cutie has well-proportioned facial features and a smooth exterior. Its hollow interior allows it to float on water. I thought long and hard about what creature inspired this treasure, and before I knew it, I was petting its beak. I'm powerless in the face of cuteness. Oh, the thing's beak. I thought you meant you were petting the actual creature's beak, and I was like, you just had a run-in with a duck and just made it through it? Stately Rubber Cutie. Compared to the other treasures found, this sculpture is tiny, yet with its beak turned courageously upward and its round eyes brimming with the spirit of adventure, I can't help but admire its gallant image. Beauty really can be found around any corner. Dapper Rubber Cutie. When I was a kid, I coveted a black leather jacket that hung in a shop window. It was so cool. I begged my parents to buy it for me, but they just scoffed in my face. So I saved up my pocket change for months and finally bought it myself. It turns out wearing a leather jacket during the peak of a Hokitate summer is a shortcut to getting heat stroke. That was the last time I ever tried to be cool. Oh, Olimar. I want to see some fan art of him wearing that leather jacket. Sweet Stumble Knot, a gigantic, brightly colored stick of candy adorned with a ribbon. My guess is that it was meant to be a gift for a child, and it would be a great souvenir to bring back to my own kids. I'll need to keep a close eye on the spaceship's temperature to prevent its melting during transport. Do candy canes really melt easily? I'm not sure. They get sticky easily, I guess. I hear this item was discovered in a bright and open area, unlike other caves I'd encountered. What's more, it was presented on a large silver plate. I wonder why it was there. I thought the plate was a bit more blue. I wonder why it was there. Is it a form of entertainment for visiting guests? Or maybe we are the guests. It's sweet, but not too sweet. Salty, but not overly so. It tastes like something a more refined palate would appreciate, perhaps belonging to someone whose tastes were developed over the course of many years. Stealing a bite of food before it's been served is quite rude, but I understand the impulse. My son and I are always waiting outside the kitchen, itching to try whatever my wife's been cooking. Thankfully, she finds it charming, or we don't have to curtail the habit. This pattern always reminds me of our family game nights. We like to play board games, but it would be even more enjoyable if we could eat the boards after. I was curious to know if the flavor was as playful as the design, so I took a bite. Tastes normal. Sweets don't simply disappear of their own accord. There has to be some sort of scientific explanation. To test my theory, I've laid out the cookies and am waiting. Normally I'd have given in to my urge to eat them, but I must stay strong. Before we got married, my wife took a compatibility test to assess our relationship. It was all for a laugh, but we got 120%, indicating we'd be eternally happy together. I don't really believe in all that fortune-telling stuff. But that test got it right. In my line of work, encountering tough situations and feeling like your life is in danger is all part of the... This is making me so happy. I love OLIMAR so much. It's all part of the job, but something about this cookie makes me feel like I have the strength to make it through. Like I have an extra heart if my first one runs out. At our wedding, our friends gave my wife and me a spaceship shaped cake that looked like a... This is cool, because you also don't get quite this degree of insight into his family life as much in Pikmin 2. Because by the time of Pikmin 2, he's like uber depressed. But he's a little more hopeful in this one, because Pikmin 2 hasn't happened yet. Only Pikmin 1 has. And he's been saved from it. He didn't have to save himself. He got a bit more of a spring in his step in this game, which is really nice. At our wedding, my friends gave my wife and me a spaceship-shaped cake that looked a lot like this one. It wasn't as big, but it resonated with my dreams of exploring space. Of course, my dreams are slightly different now, but I'm happy I still have my wife by my side. One whiff of this brings me back to the long days of summer eating ice cream with my kids. This fragrance smells like their favorite flavor, bright and refreshing. At first, I didn't want to try it, but my children insisted. Now it's my favorite ice cream flavor, too. Mint ice cream is excellent. I'm not fond of mint elsewhere, but like mint chocolate chip ice cream, oh, magnifique. I'm like pretty sensitive to mint otherwise. I used to think I had an allergy, and I might have done actually, because like it used to make my eyes really red and puffy. It doesn't as much anymore. I guess I grew out of it. My wife and I have been together for a long while, but our relationship has never been as perfectly poised as this cake. Maybe it's because I'm always flying around space and she's not at home trying to keep things together. We really are due for a date night. I hope you get one after this. It's a common practice to present an expensive gift to your intended when you propose. I didn't have the means to do so when my wife and I became engaged, and I've always regretted that fact, but at least I still love her as much as I did then. It's a multi-sensory art experience. You've got the flicker of the flame, the texture of the body, and that glorious scent that just melts into your surroundings. It's so soothing and calming. I'm getting a bit sleepy here. Is it sleep? My daughters loved shiny jewels and trinkets for as long as I can remember. She used to be happy enough with pretty stones and pieces of sea glass, but now all she wants are the more illustrious items like this. It doesn't bode well for my wallet's future. This gemstone is large, but looks kinda cheap. I've only just started to accept that one day someone might propose to my own daughter with a gift like this. I know I should probably give that person a warm welcome, but I already don't like them. I guess it's just because I don't have kids yet, but I've never really understood that. I mean, I guess it's just a matter of being, like, protective, but to me it's like, if someone proposed to my kid and was genuine and wanted to spend the rest of their life with them, it's like, that means, that's means I was a good parent and raised them to be, like, a likable, healthy adult. I don't see, that seems like it could only be flattering. Maybe that's just, maybe that's an egotistical way to look at it. Obviously, the kid would be their own person at that point. I read somewhere that some colors can have certain effects on your body. This color seems to calm my mind and help me recover my composure when I'm feeling frazzled in the field. It has an almost healing effect. The science of colors intrigues me. For example, I can feel my instincts sharpen and my zest for life intensify when I gaze upon this hue. What would happen if I were to walk through this ring with my wife? Perhaps its powers could reignite the spark between us. Reignite the spark? But I thought you just said... Well, I mean, you said things have been tough with you working and all, I guess. People tend to gather with those who are like-minded, and eventually they become friends and partners. If you want to build a circle of good friends, you must be the kind of person whose company you enjoy. Then you find companionship with yourself as well. I'm no longer trying to catch anyone's eye, but as the sole breadwinner, I need to prioritize my health so I can support my family for years to come. The problem is, I'm so busy supporting them, there's not a lot of time left for push-ups. We'll see how it all turns out. Growing up, I wasn't one for chasing balls or shedding tears over a win or a loss, but my passions were equally absorbing. I wonder why this giant fuzzy spear has me thinking of more youthful days and what they were like for the inhabitants of this planet. Its hard outer shell could withstand severe environments, but the inside appears to be unexpectedly soft. How do you must have some advanced sensors to be able to tell that, I guess. The geological layers are breathtaking. If I had to guess, I'd say this is a scale model of a celestial body. I just can't explain why I want to hit it with a stick. I can verify that there are indeed 108 stitches on this ball. I counted them myself. The process took me all night to complete. All night to count 108? Well, it's pretty big, to be fair. And you might have to verify it a few times. As an explorer, it's important to question things in order to survive, but I should be careful not to overdo it, and maybe to question the more important things. When I hear the sound this makes, the word paycheck immediately comes to mind. It's followed quickly by the image of my wife's face and her voice reciting our monthly household budget in full. Food, tuition, medical bills. The list goes on, and whenever I hear a joyful song, I'm transported back to family celebrations with live music and dancing. I see my family all dressed to the nines, looking at me with silly expressions on their faces. I hope to witness that again one day soon. It's kind of cool that they're leaning into how mostly what's keeping him and his family apart isn't anything wrong with them, it's his job. And that was sort of a major theme of the second game, so it's cool to see them sort of double down on that. A few years ago, my wife suspected I had betrayed her in some way or another and was furious at me. She was so enraged she could have turned the whole world upside down. It was terrifying yet comforting to know I still ignited such passion within her. What do you mean she suspected you had betrayed her in some way or another? Did you kill her long-fated rival before she could in a duel with katanas? That's such a strong choice of words. What is the purpose of emotions? They give our lives meaning and balance. One could not survive a life of pure sorrow, so we must find delight in things. A life of pleasure would become monotonous, so we should appreciate the bad as much as the good. I suppose I can get behind some of what you're saying there. I may not be the most graceful dancer, but who really cares? I like to let the music take over and allow my body to go with the flow. Sometimes my wife and I will be freestyling. It looks like so much fun the kids forget to be embarrassed and can't help but join in. My son is a known prankster and likes to catch my wife and me by surprise. One time he leapt out from behind a garden gnome and my wife jumped so high in surprise that she threw out her back. Since then we've established a strict household no surprises policy. Youch. I like that also, like Pikmin 2, not all the notes are just him analyzing the object. Sometimes it's like, because the disc is about surprising wisdom, he just reminisces about something that is surprising in his past or whatever. How many times have I heard my family complain about a jar that won't open or a door that won't open? And there I am saying, just run under hot water or push, don't pull. However, I've tried both on this bag, and it literally cannot be opened. When a flower blooms on a dead tree, it is nothing short of a phenomenon. I've also witnessed flowers bloom on a Pikmin's head after they drink nectar. I suspect this stick shares the same rejuvenating property exhibited by other life forms on this planet. I've found that this planet is riddled with underground caverns and passageways. I love to explore this place, but it feels like I'm in constant danger of falling into a hole. This lid must have been used to warn previous inhabitants of nearby pitfalls. I'd equip the underside of this raft with floats so that it hovers above the water's surface, making it possible to sail without sinking. Then I'd plug the holes with magnifying lenses so I could peer underwater safely. The vastness of space and the unknown it contains is an unsolvable puzzle. At the start of each voyage, I set out to unravel every mystery and discover great truths, but I always find myself returning with more questions than answers. Well, you're a deep space trucker, Olimar. What deep mysteries are you uncovering on your way to your destination? I mean, I guess you have a lot of time to peer into space at that point, but you don't always crash land on an unknown planet with unknown critters, do you? At Hakutate Freight, we often divide up our cargo in order to use the ship's space more efficiently. Big companies have huge transporters to fill up, but that also means a lot less flexibility. They're still filling up their gigantic ships while we're making deliveries. As a boy, I would spend days drawing elaborate treasure maps. The buried treasure may have been junk to the most, but to me it was precious. Is this a fragment of a treasure map? I doubt it, but the subject of this drawing was probably a treasure to the artist. Indeed. I understand the instinct to hide something precious to you, though the word protect is probably more apt. I feel similarly about my family. I do everything in my power to give them a safe, happy life. It's a simple desire, but it motivates me to carry on. This looks just like the kind of pictures you get when you let a kid play with a camera. Blurry and too close up to see anything. I deleted all those pictures my kids took to free up memory space, but I wish I hadn't. Imperfect memories can be the most precious. As a child, there were many times I'd come across something unknown to me and intuitively investigate without hesitation. It worked out well for me, I believe. As an adult, I often overthink matters, so maybe I need to recapture that daring spirit of my youth. A little bump at the end makes this look like it has a nose. Noses make me think of my son when he was a baby. I read it as when he has a baby. He'd often forget my face after I'd been gone for long stints of work and cry when I got home. But once he knew the distinctive shape of my nose, he recognized me right away. Did I dream of becoming a glorified delivery man? Or was adventure always my true goal, given my current circumstances? Who knows? I'm proud to say I've achieved both, but the president might see it differently. I'm worried about my annual bonus. This is an extremely dangerous food. Its light and airy appearance belies a rich and indulgent interior. Before you finish one, you're already reaching for the next. Is it even possible to deny such temptation? And do I even want to? I nap in the pilot seat sometimes, but a cushion like this would be a great alternative. The only weird part is that it's edible. Does that mean something or someone could eat it right out from under you? That's a major drawback. Its shape is mesmerizing. I only wish I could understand how it was sculpted. The more I think about it, the hungrier I get. Thankfully, the salty and sweet pillowy interior is as re-energizing as it is delicious. But then I start thinking again, and the cycle continues. It's often said that you don't realize how much your parents have done for you until it's too late to thank them. Yes, I think about this constantly. I try to show my gratitude and keep in touch as much as I can with video calls, but as soon as my kids pop on screen, my parents forget I'm there. I've never minded having to start over or pick up my life at the flip of a switch. My environment and those in my social circle might change, but as long as I have my family with me, I'll still be with me. They always call me out when I'm acting totally weird. It's becoming painfully obvious to me that the mind and body are closely linked. Spending so much time away from my family is hard on my mental health, and it visibly takes a toll on my body. Even when I eat healthy and exercise, I really miss them. It's like all he writes about. It's actually kind of really sad. I never consider myself to be someone with a lot of inner strength or fortitude, but my wife seems to disagree. I must be playing it way too cool when we're together. This ball is meant to represent truth, but the truth is never truly black or white. It's both subjective and objective, and extremely tricky. I think the color gray would make more sense for this object, or maybe that hideous brown you get when you mix all the paint colors together. The scent of this fruit tickles my heart for some reason. It makes me think back on summer memories, my wife smiling at me in the sunlight. She'd probably have a good laugh if she ever read this, but that wouldn't be so bad. I happen to love that sound. What a perplexing plant. It appears to be carrying two different types of berries. They must be a rare species of fruit. Both have odd traits. One seems to be a suppressant while the other is a stimulant. It's not easy to tell which is which. I remember him saying something about that in Pikmin 2 as well, but I have no idea to what he refers. They're just cherries, right? In my youth, I used to power through the long night shifts by sucking on sour fruit candy. It somehow energized me and kept me wide awake. I know the feeling. I couldn't do that now even with the candy, but it's an example of how sometimes things turning sour can work out for the best. When my first child was born, my wife and I would sit outside in the warm spring weather and take turns rocking him in our arms. Those days were filled with endless joy. The sunlight bouncing off his downy hair looked just like this. The night after I ate this fruit, I had a dream in which I saw lots of them growing, clustered together on a tree. If I were able to grow and harvest that many, we'd never run out of food. I suppose we won't know what's possible until I plant the first seed. I don't imagine you'd have an easy time growing these back on your planet anyway. It's partially because it looks very sort of dry and wastelandy, but also because I imagine the nutrients required for something this size would require a lot of nutrients in the ground. So even if it did grow, it would like eat your entire neighborhood's grass. Picking the right get well soon gift is notoriously tricky. You're supposed to choose something you think the recipient would enjoy and ignore your own preferences. That's easier said than done. When I can't think of anything good, I usually default to some sort of food like this fruit. I know I'm always hungry when I'm sick. One of this fruit will have your mouth watering, but the taste itself is sour and slightly disappointing. However, you can't let results like this keep you from trying new things. There's no greater quality than an adventurous spirit. Extremely sweet! Almost too sweet. The flavor makes you feel drowsy with joy, and you want to soak in those joyful juices forever and ever. I may need to limit my intake when it comes to this fruit. Well, I have no control when it comes to peaches. I'm not nearly as fond of peaches. Peaches, apples, and pears I feel the same way about. They're much, much better early on in the ripeness when they're not soft at all. They're just crunchy. A crunchy peach is just like, ugh. I could eat it endlessly. Speaking, and especially a nice firm grape as well. Soft grapes is no good, but when they're nice and taut like this, ugh, amazing. This fruit comes in bunches, so you can keep eating them and never run out. A single berry satisfies my appetite, but I'm grateful to live in a universe with such natural abundance. I've noticed that the skin contains a substance with antioxidant properties. That's probably why I feel so fresh and invigorated after I eat one. I wonder how I'd feel after eating two. I look at this fruit and I'm instantly overcome by the urge to split it into a million pieces. I close my eyes to avoid the thought, but the impulse just got stronger. I must be holding on to a deep desire to take on and defeat a giant spherical obstacle. Numerous pockets of juice clustered around a hollow interior, much like memories, both sweet and sour, that burst with meaning yet still cannot fill that empty place in one's heart. Gazing upon this fruit always fills me with regret. Interesting. Seems to be a citrus lump, but younger and very green. Wrong-a-mundo, I'm afraid. Inexperience is usually perceived as a weakness, but its power should not be underestimated. Many an organization has been improved by a newcomer's creative and untamed energy. The fruit on this planet is astonishingly large. If we could cultivate these ample fruits on Hokotate, nobody would ever go hungry again. Sadly, I don't know anything about agriculture. Maybe I should have listened to my wife when she told me to do yard work. I mean, you know a little bit about agriculture from your time with the Pikmin, I would imagine. My wife went through a phase where all she talked about was Pikmin and its nutritious value. She charted Pikmin U percentages, and then there was A and P. I never really understood what she was talking about, but she was so passionate about it I couldn't help but listen. I bet she'd really like to try this fruit. When I look at the company present, I can't see myself climbing the corporate ladder. This is, I think, the same entry as this he had for this item in Pikmin 2. When I look at the company present, I can't see myself climbing the corporate ladder. To be a manager, it seems like you've got to be an inhuman, heartless villain. These traits allow them to squeeze their dedicated workers without mercy and still sleep at night. I feel that same merciless cruelty radiating from this metallic altar. I wonder if it was once used for a dark, unspeakable ceremonies. Or perhaps it was once the desk of a corporate boss. We'll never know. This fruit is so shiny and round it reminds me of a beach ball whenever I see it. Yet it's so yummy that I can't help but get cravings for it and end up eating it all the time. The only drawback is that I'm constantly disappointed that I'm not on vacation. I guess they had to change some of them because some of them, the entries for these, he would specifically mention like, Louis and I found this in this hole, and which is obviously not what happened this time. But it's nice that they're not all the same anyway. But I like that a few of them are say the same just for a callback. The love between me and my wife and I has been captured in all sorts of romantic memories, as sweet and sour as this fruit. It's fun to return to those memories and feel what I felt then. Sometimes I wonder how my kids will feel the first time they fall in love. Some people may like to peel this fruit from the top, but I prefer to attack it from the bottom instead. Whenever I go from the top, I get this tingly feeling around my belly button. I find it very unnerving. How many of these fruit have you tackled to where you have a preference and know what other people's preferences are? This fruit could be hiding in more than a tasty interior. On more than a few occasions, I found bugs munching their way through this sweet flesh, presumably enjoying a snack of their own. I find to think that I share the same taste in fruit as a worm. Don't ask me how I know, but if you draw a face on this fruit, it bears an uncanny resemblance to my wife wearing a hat. It even emits the same stylish and judgmental aura. Funny how the doodled version of her face is as intimidating as the real thing. You are lucky you can be as saucy as you want in your journal. The hard, scaly shell that covers this fruit gets softer and darker as it ripens, so determining the optimal time to peel and eat it can be difficult. It's as if the fruit is actively trying to sabotage your enjoyment of it. I've never known produce to be so sneaky. I've always thought it was better to eat fruit when it's ripe, but this one is just as enjoyable and nutritious as when it's green. The same can be said about creatures like us. Many think maturity is superior, but inexperience and youth are what provide fresh perspectives. To look at a cross-section of this fruit, you'd think it was the drawing of a star, like one my son would make. Stars don't actually look like that, so why don't we draw them this way? Maybe the secret to the universe is hidden within those 5 points. I think it's just because it sparkles outward. So you want to capture that with this points. But sorry, I shouldn't be so literal. Peeling this fruit is arduous due to its soft skin. When I tried to eat it without first removing the peel, a rash developed around my mouth. I had better success when I slit grid-like cuts into the skin and flipped it inside out. The results were delicious. I had a friend who always used to bring a mango to school cut with a grid like that. Like every day without fail. It was kind of strange. But I guess I envied him because it looked really good. I must confess, I once slipped and fell on a peel that I thoughtlessly discarded onto the floor after eating the fruit inside. I'm really too old to be making mistakes like that. I can even hear my own voice scolding myself. Don't forget to clean up your trash. Throughout my life, I've met people who seemed flashy or fancy, but were actually quite down to earth. I've also met people who were as arrogant as they looked. The same lesson should be applied to this fruit. It looks pretty intimidating. What's on the inside? I've heard this mattress possesses miraculous relaxation properties that promise the most restless sleeper a good night of sleep. I was curious to know how this would affect me, who can literally sleep anywhere. Would I ever wake up again? Thankfully, I did. My beloved dog, Bulby, has the impressive ability to fall asleep anywhere he wants. We have that in common. This habit is also one of my wife's biggest pet peeves. Perhaps if Bulby had a designated bed, it would create a bit more harmony at home. This thing reminds me of this one time I was fixing the hull of the SS Dolphin. The combination of the sun and zero gravity created an illusion. It was as if I was a fish floating in the open sea. But in fact, it was just me floating in a sea of space debris. I look forward to one day gazing upon the face of my grandchild. If it's as cute as this one, I couldn't help but dote on them. But it doesn't really matter what they look like or if they resemble me or someone else in my family. I've always thought that grandchildren are meant to be spoiled. I used to know a guy who would never give in to his kids when they begged him for something, yet one look from his grandkids and he gave them anything they wanted. It seems that a grandchild possesses immense powers of persuasion. Or it's just magic. Children often exhibit both positive and negative qualities of their parents. I think that's why we feel for them so much. What's more, we want them to keep improving and even exceed the expectations we set for ourselves. It's hard work being a kid. As a parent, you need to be able to hide some emotions from your children. It's harder than you think. I remember telling my parents about my career goals and seeing the disappointment in their eyes. It hurt, but I'm glad it didn't pull me off my path. Once you have children, money starts disappearing faster than you can save it. My wife always says, if it's for the children, it's worth it. I admire her enormous heart. Still, every year it seems like the children get more and more expensive. I'm not sure why you'd want to eat raw fish. Maybe cookery on this planet is so advanced Maybe cookery on this planet advanced so far they were able to recreate the essence of the original ingredients. It'd be easier to eat if I could cut it down into smaller pieces, but that might be insulting to the chef. Okay, you're worried about that even if they're patently long dead. One of my favorite birthday gifts as a child was a book I received called 20,000 Millimeters Under the Sea. I believe I owe my adventurous spirit to that novel. How funny that a piece of seafood from a different planet could remind me of my childhood self. Never read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Or, it was a book first, right before a movie? I think so. Wait, was there actually a movie of it? The only movie I remember of it was like a Disney Channel-ass, like, musical version that was kind of strange. Right, but there was like a film of it in 54. And it was originally a novel. Right, okay. I mean, I assumed it was a novel because he was making an obvious reference. It was an obvious reference to that story. And he called it a novel, so I assumed it was. My taste in music. My taste in music is highly refined, but my wife and kids have no taste at all. For example, when I ask my family if they want to go to karaoke, they twist their faces and give me a nasty look. They don't know what they're missing. That's verbatim from Pikmin 2 for this particular item, I believe. Sometimes I miss my carefree bachelor days. Once you have a family, these days are history. I like spending time with my wife, but sometimes I just want to be alone. Incidentally, also, when he wrote for the spouse alert in Pikmin 2, and this was the sales pitch for it, but they modify. It's not verbatim. They modified it so that it doesn't sound like they're advocating adultery anymore. When I was a kid, I set out the alarm system at my primary school just to see what would happen. As predicted, I was scolded, but I have no regrets. We're naturally curious creatures. Why else would we be here? I still get the urge to set off alarms, but sadly, I've gotten better at resisting those impulses. Yeah. That was such a weird thing. Like, when you were, I guess, like, I feel like that's a universal thing. Whenever you see a fire alarm, when you were a kid, you were like, what if I just push? It's like a lever. It wants to be pulled. Despite its solemn appearance, the sound emitted by this object is airy and bright. It reminds me of the innocence and wonder that lives on in the heart of a young child. It's important to never lose that sense of childlike wonder. I know I haven't. Unpainted spaceships that look a lot like this, shiny and ripe for adventure. As a kid, I would go down to the spaceship dock just to see watch the ships being assembled. That's where I started to dream big. In reality, this is likely some kind of noisemaker. Based on its shape and where it was found, I have deduced that this is a nest for some type of aquatic creature. On Hokotate, fish are known to use sunken buildings and objects like their own underwater apartments. I'm sure many a life flourished here. Strange. Despite its calming tone, something about this melody makes my palms sweat and sends shivers up my spine. It's as if it's sending me a warning about unexpected troubles in the future. Right, because it's the title screen for Pikmin 3, where, a lot of bad stuff happens to OLIMAR. My son is always playing some sort of adventure game. He becomes the hero, defeats his arch nemesis, and saves the day at last. I admire heroic figures like that, but if given a choice, I'd choose my own life again and again. When I blow air into this rock, it makes the hair on my neck stand stick straight up. Sorry, I'm having a hard time with this sentence. When I blow air into this rock, it makes the hair on my neck stick straight up. But if I blow a little harder, the sound becomes crackly and soft. It's so pathetic I can't help but burst into a fit of giggles whenever I hear it. I wasn't surprised to discover this had been found inside a groovy longlegs deep underground. It certainly gives off the same vibes as a creature made of inorganic and organic materials. On a separate note, every time I look at it, I want to dance. It's reminiscent of a telescope I had when I was a kid. My father and I would stare up at the skies together and talk about our discoveries. That telescope nurtured my adventurous spirit. I'd love to meet the adventurer who peeked into these lenses. I was entranced by the longer needle as it spun round and round. I completely lost track of time. This object doesn't Well, it doesn't spin. It's broken. The subject doesn't strike me as otherworldly, but whenever I look at it, it's like I can feel the space-time continuum bending around me. The arrow-like object floating in the center appears to move around at will, but it's actually always pointing in the same direction. Actually, I'm kind of curious. If I rotate it, does it actually turn? It does not, no. That would have been kind of fun. It's a broken compass! It could be trying to point me toward my destiny, but I'd rather figure that out on my own. Everything looks so much bigger when you peer through this lens. You can see the smallest of details in all the different components that make up a single object. That's the proper way to conduct a scientific investigation. Why is it that a child's eyes always seem to light up at the sight of a train? My son was fascinated with them, and it was the first toy he ever wanted. I was the same way as a kid. Even now, I'm wishing I could hop on this train and go for a ride. Choo-choo! It's a good question, I'm not really sure. I wasn't much of a trains guy when I was a kid. Or ever. Long ago, railroads were the lifeblood of civilization, and the power to transport people or supplies remains key to our survival. Someone's got to move the fuel, right? I like to think of our company plays a similar role in space. It gives meaning to the daily grind. I always slow down on sharp curves, but sometimes I crave the occasional thrill of speed. Maybe if I floored the accelerator while the parking brake was engaged, it would satisfy my desire. Sometimes I look around and wonder if civilization isn't simply the result of us all trying to satisfy our desires, just enough to stay productive. An interesting thought. Also an interesting thought to think they have cars on Hokotate. I guess that makes sense, but I just like... My brain is just like, they have spaceships, so surely they get around on, like, hoverboards or something. I took my son to the zoo a few years ago, and he suddenly started crying. To calm him, I walked him back and forth on a path with no exhibits. We didn't see any animals that day, but I learned that sometimes the best solution is as simple as a change in direction. Some people think I don't like the concept of a set path or staying on the rails. That's not true at all. The only thing that matters to me is that I'm going in the right direction. How I get to my destination is irrelevant. Much like the opinions of others. Well, you did say just a moment ago that you don't want someone to tell you where you're going, so that is a way to get to the destination that you don't like, apparently, right? But like you say, in my opinion, it doesn't matter. I do not want to cross paths with the owner of these teeth. Of course, given the height of these molars, I'm guessing they are too big to have much in the way of physical agility. And that could work to my advantage if we did encounter one another. I could just run in frantic circles until they eventually gave up. I'm reminded of a toothbrush I used to have when I was a kid. I always wanted to brush my own teeth, so when my mom finally gave up helping me, it was a sweet victory. Unfortunately, that's when I started to get cavities. I guess that's the price of independence. Brushing a child's teeth for them is hard work, made worse by the fact that they're oblivious to the perils of tooth decay. I stopped brushing our kids' teeth for a time so they could learn from themselves, but that idea did not go over too well with my wife. I look at this and I'm instantly overcome by the thoughts of my mother and all the mothers out there. They represent the power of nature itself, cocooning the universe in love and fortifying it with their strength since the dawn of time. This shape resembles a mammalian appendage, but I have no idea what it actually does. It's dripping with what can only be described as beast drool. I'm hesitant to touch it, but I've got a duty to my mission, and maybe it won't be so bad if I close my eyes. Why do you need to touch it? I was in awe of modular robots when I was growing up. Their strength and abilities impressed me to my core. I doubt anyone's ever admired me in such a way, but maybe that's not so bad. I find great satisfaction to be respected as an equal. That's not true. I admire you, OLIMAR. Once I get started on something, I'm the type that can't help but keep piling on more and more for myself to do. If that's considered hard work, then I guess I like hard work. The only problem is the results of hard work isn't always good work. It's crucial to believe that you are capable of success, but just because you believe it doesn't guarantee it will happen. Then again, if you don't believe it, you're unlikely to succeed at all. That's why you have to clench your fists and remain strong in the face of every challenge. For me, the ultimate success will be returning home to my family. I believe I can. For me, love and protectiveness go hand in hand. When I think of my daughter, rambunctious, willful, a bright spark of joy, both feelings come forth at once. I'd do anything to keep her spark from fading the way mine has. If she read this now, she'd say, "Lighten up, Dad!" Legs are some of the most important parts of a living organism. Not only are they leads for walking and running, but that movement helps circulate blood throughout the body. Some even call legs the second heart. I wonder if my toes serve a second purpose as well. Many people don't realize that they not only have a dominant hand, but a dominant leg as well. My right leg is definitely my dominant leg. That leg can be even more muscular or longer than its non-dominant counterpart. Too big of an imbalance between the legs can have staggering effects. I noticed that at one time after I fractured one of my legs when I was in grade 1. Had it in a cast for a few... Well, you know, time was harder to keep track of when you were a kid. I feel like it was a few weeks, but it might have even been a few months. Nevertheless, when the cast came off, my leg was noticeably smaller, and it was really weird, and I walked around with a bit of a limp for a while. So it must have been a fair bit of time, actually, if there was time for the muscle to be noticeably different that way. This color is very similar to that of the blue Pikmin. I prefer red. I heard that Pikmin of the same color were found in the same location. Could there be a correlation? Yeah, because we found purple Pikmin near the other, and this yellow paint. Yeah, you're right about that. Some creatures change their appearances to match their environment. I'd like to observe what happens to those Pikmin when exposed to other environments. Found in a dark location. Luckily, it was just bright enough to be spotted in the vicinity of purple Pikmin. I've never associated with purple with strength, but I've since had to revise my thinking. Discovered in an obscure locale alongside white Pikmin. Creatures with bright colors are usually more likely to be packing poison, while creatures with dull coloration are generally harmless. But this doesn't apply to white Pikmin. In fact, they're dangerously poisonous. No doubt they use this to their advantage. Well, I mean, they're pretty bright white with red eyes and pink flowers, and so I think they are pretty brightly colored, I would have said. This color reminds me of rock Pikmin. When I first touched one, I was surprised by how cold it felt. It was a pleasant sensation, and they didn't seem to mind my curiosity. Much like this treasure, rock Pikmin were found in a dark, chilly place. How appropriate. This color reminds me of the ice emitted by the Susnis Nivis Ventus, which is the icy blowhog, I guess. Is it a coincidence that I encountered this treasure and ice Pikmin in the same area? It's no because it says Ventus, which sounds like wind. It's no coincidence that ice Pikmin are called that. If I licked one, I'm sure my tongue would stick to it. What a strange example. The statue seems to be imbued with the majesty of an ancient goddess. When I look up at her, I can't help but be mesmerized by her beauty, until my neck starts throbbing in pain. This looks a lot like a figurine my son learned about in school. I've always wondered why she wears goggles. What does she have to hide? Maybe a secret past with another ancient statue floating around out there? I look forward to discussing this theory with my son. Could I be related to the person who modeled for this statue? While examining it earlier, I found myself striking the same pose without even realizing it. If we do share the same genes, how did they end up on this side of space? Looking upon this warrior's calming visage, whatever you want to say, is a peaceful way to spend an hour. The eyes seem to see through everything as if their gaze is freeing you from the darkness of your mind. Perhaps I stumbled upon the sacred key to life's greatest questions. I can't pinpoint the exact moment, but this reminds me of the face my wife once made when I delivered a perfectly executed dad joke. It looks sort of unamused, doesn't it? What mysterious and fluffy creatures. I can't find evidence of them in any of the existing creature databases, but there's something familiar about them. It's almost as if I'd met them before. I guess I'll chalk it up to an ancient memory that's been imprinted on my genome. Are they about to tell us that Hakatashians descended from humans? That seems drastically unlikely, but would be really, really interesting if true. Quantifying the warmth in your heart. What a brilliant idea. The next time there's a mix-up between my wife and me, I can just show her the numerical value of my feelings for her. Then we could use it on her and... Actually, that part might backfire. No, I'm sure it wouldn't. Tasks in space require accurate timing. Docking a spaceship is a good example of that. If the monitors on my ship were to break, I'd need to measure the time using my instincts alone. This is the perfect tool to help me develop an accurate sense of time. I may be able to embed this on the wall of the ship's computer room. It could be useful for making manual calculations should the ship's AI ever crash unexpectedly. Space pilots need to be prepared for any emergency, and I'll take all the help I can get. This is an extremely sturdy calculator. I never thought sturdiness was a necessary quality for a calculator, but I do recall my wife recalculating our monthly budgets multiple times after shopping trips with extreme vigor, and the calculators I've used for both life and work do have a tendency to get thrown around. I guess the craftsman on this planet had the right idea. A strange life form that mimics an octopus. We've discovered other creatures that use mimicry, but in this case it's fairly unconvincing. I'm not even sure it is a life form. I intend to dissect it and investigate further, but first I will try one tiny bite. It's gonna explode on you. It's disturbing to see a mouth that can be removed like a cap. If it were reattached improperly, would the bodily fluid simply pour right out? I remember when a supposedly airtight container of mine once failed. My bag smelled like onion soup for a week. A fossil excavated at the beach. From its shape, I can deduce that it was cast by an aquatic creature. That could indicate the current site of the beach was once the ocean floor. Very interesting theory. I suppose the tide could have also just carried it in. This spear looks like a rocket from the early days of space exploration. It may even conceal some kind of high propulsive force within, but I hope it has more romantic history than that, and that it protected explorers as they sailed through space pursuing their dreams. My little girl has always been the princess of our household. If there was a miniature version of this, I'd love to present it to her as her own personal fork. I can imagine it now. She'd be so ecstatic, swinging it all around, wreaking havoc, scaring the dog. Never mind. I think our little princess is a tad too spirited for a gift like this. Careful, this tool is very sharp. Its original owner might have wanted to pierce or crack things open at any cost. As a lover and preserver of unique objects, I'm not quite sure I understand the purpose of value of an item such as this. During slow days at work, I like to play this game where I use the zero gravity to float toy rockets in front of the ship's window. Then I act out scenes from my favorite childhood TV show and pretend there's a galactic war going on in the distance. I should probably edit these notes before the president asks to review them. Why would the president ask to review your diary? I think this might be a tool for warding off predators. Perhaps if I attach it to my back, the creatures of this planet would be deterred from chasing me. I could test the theory on the Pikmin. Of course, they might end up carrying me instead, treasure and all. I like pressing the different directions of this mathematical symbol, but there's something captivating about the two round buttons. I can't help but want to push them over and over as fast as I can. I don't want to break them, but I don't want to stop either. How interesting that the artists use a black plank as a canvas and they chose to depict the pilot. They look like the type that works hard for their beloved family, though the design of the spaceship is all wrong. Good luck flying that thing through narrow meteor crevices. It's a bit unusual to call something a masterpiece before you read it, but I've got a good feeling about this one. I think it's meant for children, but is it about a boy or a girl? Hopefully both. It's been hard to please everyone in the audience at bedtime lately. Space is a funny place. You can be using the latest in galaxy navigation technology and still find yourself lost in a sea of space trash. But that's life, isn't it? If you want to advance, you're gotta be flexible. Advance, I get it. This also applies to setting marital disagreements. Whoa, settling marital disagreements. Took a wild turn, but I suppose that's true as well. What your eyes might see is not an exact representation of reality. We can only see one part of the world within a narrow range of visible light. This magnificent device proves that theory. I'd love to show it to my kids one day. It would boggle their minds. I'm picky when it comes to music, but I'm fascinated by how a melody can perfectly capture a person's soul or even a specific feeling. I wonder what my song would be. I'd like to think it would sound bold and romantic and reflect my adventurous career. Maybe I should just write it myself. Come on, Olimar. We know the song that reflects your heart is da 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 da. The ability to stay balanced is critical to exploration and space travel. It is okay to lose your balance as long as you can regain it right away. This tool is perfect for strengthening that skill. The only problem is I can't get it to move forward when I'm on my back. Why would you? This tasty red snack isn't quite a fruit, but it doesn't seem like a vegetable either. I've analyzed it extensively, and whenever I think I've settled the matter, I discover something new and it calls it all into question. This is why I'm not a scientist by trade. Only by hobby. When I was a student, a girl in my class asked me to go shopping with her. It would have been rude to refuse, so I went. My friends kept hassling me, saying it was a date. It was so embarrassing. But come to think of it, my wife asked me out soon after that. I wonder if she was jealous. Well, you knew her from school, did you? Oh, you've been together forever then. This plant grows so fast it reminds me of my own children. One day they are little babies inside my arms. Inside my arms? One day they are little babies in my arms. The next day they're sprouted into fully fledged people. I have my wife to thank for that. She does so much while I'm so frequently away for work. I once saw a prototype of a spaceship that looked a lot like this. Unfortunately, it didn't fly straight. It just spun around in place. Examples like that are why I prefer a more traditional approach. Being original for the sake of originality is usually a waste of time. I'm not sure I'll debate you on that, but I'm not sure I agree. During my explorations, I found vegetables like this. I've never seen anything like them. This dark-dwelling vegetable stores all of its nutritious energy in its roots. I think the name that it's been given, Child of the Earth, is very fitting. I wonder how they handled the name of this treasure in the French version, because it's in French, a potato is an earth apple, which is kind of similar to what they're calling it here. Anyway, when my son was born, I was almost immediately worried about him, but it was different with my daughter. I sensed from the start that she was strong-willed and sturdy, a sweeter version of her mother. This daughter of the earth reminds me of her. You want to be careful about how you phrase that. It makes it sound like you don't consider your wife sweet enough. Large, and the size is right for retrofitting it into some sort of vehicle. Maybe a carriage? But then what do you do with all the goopy insides? Flippantly throw them out the window as you roll away in your fancy new transport? Never. I am vehemently opposed to wasting food. I don't need any special tools to break open the shell, and the fruit inside is edible. Cracking these open is so satisfying that I find myself getting carried away at opening more than I could possibly eat. Note to self, work on moderation. The shape of this fruit looks a lot like my grandpa's face. It's so similar that if I were to name it, I'd call it a grampy face fruit. My wife always thought my taste in names was catastrophically bad, which is why she named both of our children, but I think this one has a certain ring to it. When I was little, I'd look at pictures of the planets and imagine that the rings around them were the roads you could travel on. Of course, once I got to space, I learned that those rings are usually made up of dust particles. I've never been so disappointed. Someone told me that when a satellite is decommissioned, some of its lights will start to blink spontaneously as it falls through the atmosphere. It's likely a glitch, but I'd like to believe that the satellite's sending one last message before burning up into nothingness. Jeepers. I often encounter comets and meteors on the job, and collisions are bound to happen. I once had to make a crash landing for that very reason. I like to look back at those events as unexpected adventures, but at the same time, they're pretty harrowing. It must have been pretty hard to see the sword in the forest as it would blend in with the foliage. Applying to apathetic? Never heard of this word in my life. Of or relating to coloration that disguises and protects an animal. Right. It might be apathetic, actually. There was a pronunciation listed there in the universal pronunciation language or whatever it's called, and I don't know it. Yet. Applying apathetic coloration to a weapon is more than just practical. It's brilliant. I'm always amazed at the creative solutions that float around in the minds of others. I've visited a few icebound planets while delivering cargo throughout space. Based on my experience, I find it hard to believe that this material could withstand such a severe environment. I think it's likely this object was used for another purpose. My son used to have a toy sword. It was in response to Schnauz's analysis. My son used to have a toy sword in a similar color. He was obsessed with it and brought that sword everywhere where he went, including the dinner table. That is until I explained that it was dishonorable for a hero to attack a weaker citizen wielding only a fork. With all these different colored swords, I assume that the armies on this planet color-coded their troops. An entire unit with matching weapons and uniforms would have been a sight to behold. I'm sure this color especially stood out. They say it's possible to float this unfloatable boat with the help of divine intervention. That sounds a lot like luck to me. I've had my fair share of bad luck, but at least I've been fortunate enough to survive. Anyhow, my chances don't look good. Of the boat, you mean, right? Attaching an intangible wish to a tangible object seems to be a universal habit. I wish for my family's happiness, but haven't quite found the right talisman to attach to it. My family must be wishing for my safe return. I hope they have better luck. This bird reminds me of a mythical creature famous for granting immortality to those brave enough to seek it out. I have no interest in living forever, or maybe the idea of risking my life for the sole purpose of avoiding death just sounds a bit wonky to me. Why not enjoy the time you have while you have it? Anyway, this is a nice shade of red. To have a charm that's solely devoted to financial luck comes off as vulgar and gives me an icky feeling. On the other hand, money is a necessity, and that's an inescapable fact. Well, there is one escape: more money. Wouldn't that be nice, to have a bit more? I am deeply moved when I imagine ancient peoples entrusting this small, smooth ball with their hopes and dreams, then passing it down through the ages. It'd be a comfort to know that my dreams won't die with me, but will somehow transcend time. I'm so bemused by the idea of catching a dream, but it's difficult to achieve in practice. I still haven't been able to catch the ball with the spike upright. Perhaps I need to try an easier angle. But would that diminish the challenge and thus the quality of the dream? Maybe, but also how the hell are you using this thing? Don't worry too much. I guess it does sort of get shrunken as it gets recovered. So maybe that's how this is all working, and I should have assumed that, because they get stored in a car. Yeah, no, you know that. I always thought that was super weird in Pikmin 2 when they were all like talking about using these items or like tasting them, but they do have like tractor beams that like shrink things as they go to store them, so that's probably how. Don't worry too much if it deflates. Simply pump more air into the top hole and the original shape is restored. The material, though paper thin, seems to repel water. Such an inspiring creation. Only the most advanced civilization could conceive of such a work of art. It's like a metaphor for both the fragility and durability of life itself. Some might look at this and see a symbol for life, but this treasure better represents courage. The two are closely related, of course. Power and wisdom also have roles to play, but without the courage to take that first step, your journey cannot begin. That's like the third Zelda reference we've made this episode. There's physical power, and then there's mental power. Anyone who's witnessed an argument between me and my wife could clearly see who's quicker on their feet in the heat of the moment. That doesn't bother me so much. I just wish I had the same fortitude and wit to stand up to the president. Possessing wisdom isn't always a good thing. Sure, you can examine a subject from multiple angles, but you can also get stuck in a maze of thoughts. Am I envious of people who can just act on instinct without overthinking every last detail? Let's see. Maybe. Appears to have the same composition as the gold on my planet. I've heard that some heavy elements, like gold, are created during rare collisions between neutron stars, but to think that the same element exists on a faraway planet reminds me, space is so vast. I've lived through some harrowing events, and the trick to surviving in space is to prepare for every possible situation. But this is technically and literally impossible. Sometimes you just need to roll the dice, hope for the best, and let the universe do its thing. Having to choose 1 out of 20 possible scenarios during a voyage through space would be an object lesson in randomness, and very unfortunate. On the minuscule chance that it should ever occur, the only solution would be to throw up your hands and laugh. When I gaze at this stone, I can feel my fate being forecasted. It must know what's going to happen to me. I'm sure it sees that I'll be hailed as a brilliant visionary and brave explorer when I return to Hokutate. That's a Pikmin 2 one, I'm pretty sure. While exploring, I'm often faced with the difficult question, which way do I go? North, south, east, or west? A tool like this could be useful in those moments. Of course, one roll would be too random. It'd be best to roll 100 times and take the average result. I hope to one day celebrate a high-numbered birthday, but I don't think there will be any large birds in attendance at the party. Just think of how much trouble they could cause. If space has taught me anything, it's to plan for the worst-case scenario. Springtime always reminds me of the day I moved out of my parents' house. At first, everything was fresh and exciting, but I quickly realized that life my own was a lot harder than I expected. I also realized that I should thank my parents for all they've done for me. When my son was little, he thought the moon was just a powdered donut in the sky. He would cry and cry, "I want to eat the moon!" Apparently, I was the same way. These days, he loves to look at the moon through a telescope. Guess the apple doesn't fall far. I love rainy days. They're the perfect time to catch up on paperwork, relax a bit, and dream about my next big adventure. I'm much the same way. That is, if I have any energy left after entertaining my kids who can't go outside to play when it's wet. I'll take what I can get. And that's back to the beginning. Perfect. We did all the treasures and it only took 52 minutes. My. In that case, I probably should leave the OLIMAR little quest thing for another episode. Sorry about that. I thought for sure I'd be able to get through this a little faster, but I'm so enthralled, and we're obviously not done yet. That's the wrong button. Although initially identified as a juvenile bulborb, groundbreaking new research indicates that this creature is in fact a member of the breadbug family. A close relative of breadbug, it escapes predation through mimicry. Unique adaptation of the bulborb's crimson coloration allows the species to effectively commingle. Such effective adaptation and obfuscation by prey species is rare, indicating that this clever creature is a master of mimicry. I could have sworn he said obfuscation in Pikmin 2, but this is verbatim from Pikmin 2. A bulborb larva after its first molt. Due to its pale coloration, it was assumed to be a mimic when it was first discovered. It was later confirmed to be a true dwarf bulborb. To avoid predation from adult bulborbs, it spends the majority of the daytime hours hiding underground. It becomes more active at night when its paler coloration is more difficult to see. In this state, it is difficult to discern what species of bulborb any given juvenile may be based on appearance alone. It's only after a bulborb's second molt they start to display more distinguishing species characteristics. I wonder if that's why these ones take 2 to the back to take out, because they're true bulborbs. Maybe oh no, but the orange ones are also breadbugs, aren't they? This large organism has the familiar mandibles and cranial morphology of the grubdog family, as well as the characteristic bulging eyes. As with most grubdogs, the creature's cranium comprises... It's a lot of C's. As with most grubdogs, the creature's cranium comprises half of its total length and girth. Showing a scarlet abdomen with white spots, this creature is primarily nocturnal, choosing to prey upon smaller creatures returning to their nests. Originally classified as the spotty bulborb, further research has reclassified this species as the basic bulborb. Subspecies of varied colors have recently been discovered, but academics are divided into 2 rival camps over how to handle their classification. This is the part that always confused me, is because, I thought the only thing... I thought you were the first one to be on this planet of all known sentient people, but maybe he just means it was uncharted for Hokutashians. But they do specifically say it's like uncharted at the beginning of Pikmin 2. During reproduction, and after an egg is fertilized by a sperm, any excess chromosomes are usually discarded through a process called meiosis, but occasionally this process fails to occur and a bulborb individual will develop irregularly due to this chromosomal abnormality. Specimens like this one are stronger than the average bulborb and can exhibit more aggressive behavior. However, they are not able to procreate, as they will never reach sexual maturity. Very interesting. Just as dwarf red bulborbs mimic the appearance of the bulborb, it was theorized that a variant mimicking the orange bulborb must also exist. Recent fieldwork has confirmed this theory. This bulborb species boasts a garish color pattern with a deep orange body and black spots. The orange bulborb's yellow bloodshot eyes make it clear that this bulborb is excessively edgy and high-strung, making it much easier to wake from the deep sleep than the other species in the grubdog family, as we observed. A spotty bulbar larva in its 3rd stage of development, this creature's body structure is nearing maturation. However, unlike mature bulbars, it has yet to reclaim its own patrol route, and thus it is dependent on its parent for guarding direction. They actually more closely follow their parents in the first game, and perhaps the second game as well. Maybe the third one as well? Whereas in this one, they're usually just kind of wandering around. elsewhere. A mid-sized subspecies within the grub dog family, the spotty bellbear's unique feeding habits set it apart from other grub dogs. It patrols a set path, searching for prey instead of passively feeding on creatures that wander into a limited territorial range. When entering spotty bellbear habitat, it is wise to proceed with extreme caution until the bellbear's patrol path can be clearly identified. Much like more mature specimens, this juvenile frosty bellbear was able to create and carry ice on an epidermis that promotes extracellular freezing. However, they take an entire night to regenerate their ice, which is why they're often accompanied by adults. Juveniles display a smaller number of spots than the adults, causing some to believe that this was actually a species of mimicking breadbug. However, the result of further analysis has proved this was not the case. A bellbear with large amounts of ice and frost covering its midsection. It's unusual to find ice such as this attached to a living organism, as it's cold enough to freeze small animals and regenerates any ice mass that gets broken off. This bellbear species' intercellular stores of sugars, amino acids, and other organic acids provide it with a plant-like resistance to freezing, making it possible for the bellbear to touch the ice without freezing itself. Bodily excretions of a highly flammable waxy substance interact with the cell structure of this grub dog's skin, causing a chemical reaction that produces extremely high temperatures. The skin benefits from a spongy cell structure that diffuses the surface heat, protecting the creature's inner organs. Due to the astonishing amount of heat produced by this beast, it should be observed with great caution. Instead of the gnashing jaws usually found in relating species, it uses its extensible viscous tongue to capture prey. Even before it opens its mouth, it's recognizable by its tapered snout and black spots against its white back. Some theorize that it evolved its long tongue to snatch prey drawn to high-blooming flowers, but a recent finding confirmed that until its second molt, this creature feeds with its teeth, much like the other guard dog species. It will begin to use its tongue once it reaches adulthood. As its name implies, this creature is a bellbear in an early stage of development. Its distinct bellbear coloration has yet to appear, but it already exhibits other uniquely bellbear characteristics. It is capable of hunting nourishment independently without the help of its parents. Initial observations place doubt on the capability of the grub dog family to support a strong ant or bee-like social structure, but recent studies show the family is capable of such complexity for brief periods when certain external parameters are met. The egg sac of the largest female grub dog within a given range swells to dramatic proportions in response to environmental changes, such as the sudden depletion of prey species. These females temporarily take on the role of pack matriarch. How we just noticed that they actually know what ants and bees are like. Also, in pack formation, it has been observed that nearly all males not involved in species reproduction undergo natural sex changes. The characteristics of such specimens are quite intriguing indeed. Bulborb said trans rights. Interesting that it says active during day only. I guess that just means we won't find it during any night expeditions, but I sort of assumed that anyone that said night implied works in the dark, as in caves. Oh man, this one says day-night, so we're gonna have to fight some of these during night expeditions. The largest member of the grub dog family is normally found burrowed under the ground. Its camouflage allows the predators to surprise smaller creatures and use its long adhesive tongue to capture prey. The thick hide and angular hump give the organism a distinct rock-like quality. During the rainy season, moss grows freely on its hump, making it nearly impossible to distinguish this lethal predator from a stone. This creature expels a volatile phosphorus compound from its snout that combusts upon contact with the air. Its fire-breathing ability is dependent upon the air-to-fuel ratio at its mouth, catalyst reaction with the expelled compound, and purification of the compound. Thus, it is highly unlikely such a complex process could cause the spontaneous combustion of a fallen blowhog. This process is also perhaps to avoid risk of spontaneous combustion in the belly of a live specimen. However, one should still treat a fire blowhog with great care during transfer. This species has the ability to condense atmospheric carbon dioxide with an organ called a cold sac. The cold sac creates dry ice, and its vapors are then expelled as icy breath. A close relative to the species, the fiery blowhog, can keep its internal body temperature from rising because the phosphoric compounds it expels only ignite when they make contact with the air. In contrast, the snowy blowhog maintains an internal body conditions below freezing, and its other internal organs are protected by thick layers of fat and the extracellular freezing that occurs within its cold sac. Similar to an ancestor species of the fiery blowhog, this creature has a pair of sharp tusks that uses to charge enemies with vigorous violence. It demonstrates its aggressive nature when it pursues prey and when it's attacked by a predator of its own. In the case of the latter, the tusked blowhog will attack its attacker, causing them to balk while it can dash away to safety. This species also has an extremely sharp sense of smell, which causes it to detect the pheromone-like scent of its favorite food, underground mushrooms. This specimen is a lithopod larva. Lithopods, like flint beetles, use internal metabacteria to aid chemical digestion. These metabacteria can only survive in certain environments, such as within the body of I change? Oh, I just swapped it to the Dolma. Whoops. I was like, how did the words all changed? Such as within the body of certain insects, the lithopod larvae do not contain any metabacteria immediately after hatching. Larvae feed on partially digested or regurgitated by mature lithopods, ensuring that the larvae obtain metabacteria they would normally have acquired. Males of the species are known for their horn-like blowholes. When females reach maturity, their blowhole closes and they lose the ability to launch rocks. At the start of breeding season, the females lay eggs on rocks launched by a male. The rocks then become food for the growing larvae. Though once mistaken for adult armored cannon beetles, this species is actually a naturalized non-native species that migrated here from another continent. The horned cannon beetle can breed with adult armored cannon beetles, but only about half of the eggs will actually hatch. This hybrid species has the potential to seriously pollute the gene pool. Furthermore, it exhibits aggressive territorial behavior, sometimes launching boulders at young armored cannon beetles, which has driven the latter species to the verge of extinction. Very interesting, because I think when he says it used to be mistaken for large adult armored cannon beetles, I think he was under that impression in the second game. Like other members of the Lothopod family, its internal bacteria are specialized to form ice compounds from ambient moisture, which it then expels as projectiles. It technically doesn't rely on cold temperatures to create this ice, which is formed by pressurized internal fluids that act as a coolant. When the projectiles rapidly expand, they absorb ambient heat, lowering the air temperature enough for the moisture in the air to freeze. Upon reaching maturity, the blowhole in its head closes, leaving in its place the pointed crest of the Arctic cannon beetle's shell. In order to get enough food in nutrient-deficient environments, adult specimens start breathing through their mouths. Some experts have posited that this adaptation caused the species to lose territorial competitions with the armored cannon larva, driving it into colder environments. Though this beetle has increased suction strength, it must ventilate via a spiracle on its abdomen and open its shell to avoid rapid body inflation. The males of this species are purple and black creatures with tapered mouths, while the females are lighter in color and lack an armored exoskeleton. As with most mandiblars, these creatures have regressed to the point where they have lost both legs and wings. It can be seen crawling around on the ground and are believed to feed on the vegetable extracts from the congealed fluids of expired Pikmin. This specimen is a male sheargrub. Having lost both legs and wings, the male burrows into the soil and waits to ambush small creatures that pass by. This beast's mandibles can be dangerous, making creatures such as Pikmin easy prey. Unusual for their genus, flying mandiblars have retained their wings. However, only the adult males of the species can fly. Females of the species might spend most of their lifespan underground. They do emerge for a period after maturation to spawn, but they never metamorphose. The sensory hairs growing on this creature's orange body segments can detect body temperatures, movements, and carbon dioxide levels. It clings to its prey with its claw-like front legs and sucks their blood through its pointed proboscis. Research has found that the shear flea can store energy created while contracting its bellows-like body in the elastic proteins located at the roots of its hind legs, allowing it to repeatedly jump very high. Its reproductive rates are rather explosive. A small group of egg-laying females can boom into a population of over 100 in a month's time. Others within this family wear their shells on their bellies, but this one's shell functions more like a helmet. Its wings have atrophied to uselessness, so instead it burrows beneath the ground and pops out only to pierce prey with its needle-like proboscis and drain their bodily fluids. Larval gesmites remain underground for years, or even decades in some cases. It's a close relative of the original Bronit species, but this variety of gesmite still has the use of its wings. Oddly, it still makes its habitat below ground and employs the same tactic of lying in wait before emerging to strike. The helmet protecting its head is functionally as hard as steel due to waxy secretions in its pores that absorb and redirect any shocks it sustains. The scarpinids originally lived on the ground, sporting poorly developed vestigial wings. This species developed enlarged antennae that can be used as makeshift wings. Scarpinids are attracted by the sight of large groups of Pikmin in cavalry formation and will swoop down to seize them. However, scarpinids do not eat Pikmin, and they will drop any seized Pikmin after a short time. The reason for this behavior is unknown, but I look forward to future research in the area. The skater leaf is a relative of the pond skater that shed its wings and adapted to life on the ground. With no residual traits of its airborne past, the skater leaf can neither fly nor skate across the surface of the water. The wings have since evolved into the leaf-like structure on its back, which serves to hide the skater leaf through mimicry. It appears quite effective, as few predators can see through this clever disguise. The skaterling variant that resembles dead leaves. Its legs have developed in specific ways. The front claws capture prey, while the flat hind legs are suited for running and swimming. Its highly tuned senses keep it still for any creature but Pikmin. Once it gets its claws on its prey, it doesn't easily let go. Recent research has revealed that its camouflage has a second purpose beyond hunting. Scavengers are fooled by its disguise into carrying eggs, thereby expanding the population. Members of the I don't understand how that works. And members of the Dweevil family are known for carrying objects of astounding size on their backs while mimicking them. The fiery Dweevil is one species in this family. Generally, this is a very gentle insect that feeds on grass nectars, but when faced with danger, the fiery Dweevil ignites flammable internal gases just at its jaw and spews scorching flames. As this clearly makes it a rather dangerous insect, it is best not to linger directly in front of it. Members of the Dweevil family are known for carrying objects of astounding size on their back and mimicking them. The Anode Dweevil is one species in this family. They seem to have no particular preference for which objects they carry on their backs, as they will lift anything carry anything they can lift. They boast an internal organ that generates electrical charges with which the Anode Dweevil releases when it senses danger. Several points of different differentiation with other members of the species have been confirmed, such as body color and behavioral patterns, but none of these suggest major deviations in the creature's genetic structure. This makes it clear that it is a relative of the family. When attacked by enemies, the Hydra Dweevil spits out bodily fluids in response. Spacesuits corrode and oxidize when they come into contact with this liquid. Dweevils have varying body colors in response to their feeding habits. Each of the species feeds on different types of plants and small animals, so the symbiotic bacteria that create their pigmentation differ as well. The ice-blown Dweevil lives in cold habitats and spews frigid gas, so the workings of its symbiotic bacteria are dulled and it retains its natural color, which is white. It's been confirmed that in more temperate climates where food that the fiery Dweevil eats is readily available, the ice-blown Dweevil's coloration is much peachier. The Venom Dweevil is one member of the Dweevil family, which is known for mimicking right. These insects often carry carcasses of other life forms on their backs. Apparently this is not for the purpose of transporting them as food, but instead as another example of their mimic behavior. The Venom Dweevil produces two different chemical compounds within its body, which form poisonous gas when mixed and expelled. This gas is used only for self-defense. Groovy long legs. This species has some remaining organic internal organs, but its carapace and eyes are made up of inorganic material. All 19 of its eyes are actually photoelectric sensors that the species uses to precisely locate its prey. The gas emitted from the posterior of its first leg joints includes a chemical substance that, after making contact with another organism's brain, temporarily controls that organism's actions. The groovy long legs uses this natural phenomenon, called the endless dance, to make its prey jump between its legs while it moves around in bizarre rhythms. I'm glad you finally got to learn all this, because you were really confused about how all this stuff worked when you were down there in your writing logs. But now that you're back with us, you can actually analyze the data. The entire interaction is seemingly odd for a living organism, but the line between organic and inorganic on this planet is not always clear. This specimen is representative of an insect hybrid that uses electricity in addition to give to glycogen for its energy. Although difficult to confirm due to their microscopic size, tiny hairs in this creature's legs cause the friction that generates the electrical charge. The electrical charge is processed by the creature's internal battery structure and then stored as an electrical field. As this field reaches critical levels, surplus electricity is emitted, resulting in a low voltage current that is transferred between specimens. It can shock other creatures in the immediate vicinity. Considering this process can be surmised that the largest impetus to pack behavior is not so much for the synergic effect of producing as a pack as it is to take advantage of this most effective means of group preservation. I'm going to look up glycogen. The stored form of glucose that's made up of many connected glucose molecules. I see. So it burns its body's natural sugars and fats for electricity. Just with sci-fi magic. Flint beetles are known to hide in the grass until approached, at which point they jump out and scurry around. These creatures keep undigested food pellets in their stomachs to sustain them through the winter, but given the right stimulus, they will spit them out. Recent research has revealed that these pellets are enveloped in a membrane that seals and preserves them in a sterile, airtight environment. If kept at room temperature, it seems this pellet membrane will keep its contents fresh for up to 6 months. The membrane may be made from the same substance that gives the exoskeleton of the flint beetle its beautiful sheen. These parasitic insects feed on eggs. Upon reaching maturity, they excrete a special pheromone that attracts females of particular species, enticing these females to swallow the metites whole. Pikmin, however, seem to dislike the scent. After entering the host female's body, the metites lay their own eggs inside the host's eggs just prior to the host spawning. Its main offensive strategy is to launch the crystal it carries on its back, otherwise it's completely defenseless. In most circumstances, it's a peaceful herbivore whose diet consists primarily of moss. When in danger, thankfully not the dog. When in danger, however, it wastes no time defending its territory by breaking small rocks and hurling them at the threat. In order to ensure it has a steady supply of rocks with which to defend itself, it shares its habitat with calcified crushed black larvae so it can make use of the shells they cast off. We've not seen one of those yet in this game. It skates on water at high speed thanks to the tiny hairs on the tips of its feet. These hairs are coated in an ultra-hydrophobic substance to minimize friction against the water's surface. Its long proboscis functions as a straw to take in water, which is stored in a reservoir on its head, as well as to spout it as a weapon against small insects. While taking in water, it also takes in microscopic plankton, meaning that its prime means of defense is also a feeding mechanism. It's remarkably similar to its unmarked brethren, but the telltale wing patterns and lone pair of hind legs give it away. It sticks to its unmarked spectralids are what you fight in Pikmin 2. Well, fight is pretty generous. It sticks to its own habitat for the most part, though it may fly away to reach a flower or escape a bulbax. It will soon return to its home. The white variety gathers no nectar, but sometimes may be found carrying raw material. The primary morphological difference from other spectralids is the eye-like spot on its hind wings. When crossbred with red spectralids, the offspring has a 25% chance of inheriting these spots on orange colored wings. Would this count as a new subspecies? So if it's a 25% chance, then that makes it, what is it? It's like that it conforms to Mendelian genetics or whatever it's called. Is it Mendelian? Where it's all you get the cross, the 4 squares, and it's been a long time since I was in high school, man. I mean, only 4 or so years, but it's been a long time, man. The cooling cycle in its body uses ammonia as a refrigerant to chill the moisture it absorbs from the air until it reaches a supercooled state. By then spraying it out of the several vents on its belly, the snowflake fluttertail creates a delicate cocoon out of ice to both protect itself and freeze its prey. Its rolled up spirally proboscis evolved from an upper jaw and can catch and tie up prey with the fine hairs on its surface. Though it mimics a type of swallowtail butterfly, this creature is actually more closely related to moths. One might extrapolate that its ancient ancestor was unable to adapt to the cooling climate and therefore went extinct. Weird again that you know what butterflies and moths are, but call those things spectralids, in spite of their basically butterfly-like appearance. Like Pikmin, the creeping chrysanthemum is a member of a group of creatures with ambulatory root structures. This creature is known as a mimic, but because it is actually a form of plant, the label is not entirely accurate. It uses this mimicry to lie in wait and ambush prey, unrecognized even by Pikmin despite its being members of the same class of organisms. It relies on preying upon other creatures to provide sustenance, so it has no need of leaves for photosynthesis. Generally speaking, the rule of plants within an ecosystem is as a producer species, and thus plants are generally found at the bottom of the food pyramid. However, on this strange planet, the line between producer plants and consumer plants is blurred. The defining characteristics of the fungi that grow from its head differ from that of the chrysanthemum family's creeping chrysanthemum, but the makeup of the body out of which they grow is mostly the same. As a result, we can theorize that this, like fellow Ambularaticus, like the bowman, this species is not an evolutionary variant, but that the body is a parasite that has nestled inside of a group of mushrooms. Because the hosts are mushrooms, the startle spore cannot photosynthesize. Instead, it gains its nutrients by catching its prey with highly poisonous fluids or by absorbing the nectar in the ground left behind as creatures killed by its poison decompose. The adult breadbug competes for many of the same food sources as Pikmin, but its thick-skinned hide allows it to withstand most Pikmin group attacks. However, some researchers claim to have observed breadbugs being overwhelmed by massive numbers of Pikmin and reduced to food. This gargantuan species of the greater breadbug family has a torso so perfectly square that it almost seems like it was formed in a mold. For a brief period after birth, the giant breadbug competes for food with smaller breadbugs, but upon reaching maturity, it seeks out much larger prey. This is the primary reason two species with similar feeding habits can coexist in the same habitat. Hordes of Pikmin appear to pose the only plausible threat to this massive creature's life. Immediately after hatching, this species presents itself in a gilled, tadpole-like form and grows its legs after about a week. This juvenile Gildamander's specimen is estimated to be about 1 month old due to its the presence of an oral-like growth on its back and the fact that it has already emerged onto land. The living ore has substances other than similar to treasure within it, a peculiar scent, and has an effect on both sensors and Pikmin. However, the lantern organ on its head is still undeveloped and can only emit very faint electromagnetic waves. For this reason juvenile Gildamanders often hide out of sight to avoid Pikmin attacks. The living ore. That's interesting. The ore-like growth on its back is a coagulated body fluid that includes a substance similar to sparklium, which can make our mechanical sensors go berserk, to use the technical term. This living ore emits a sense that lures the creature's prey, so it's also important for their feeding process. The lantern-like organ atop its head emits electromagnetic waves that are known to affect Pikmin and onions, confusing them into thinking that Gildamander is their leader, allowing it to withdraw Pikmin directly from the onion. However, it cannot go so far as to command them as a squad, so the Pikmin will often hide under cover and are able to avoid ingestion. God, I hope it says active during day. I hope we don't have to fight any of these out on the field that will try and draw Pikmin out of their onion. Immediately after birth, the species' skin starts to harden, and before long it will reach the same impenetrable toughness as that of an adult. Adult snoot whackers are dexterously use their trunks to grab food from high tree branches, but juveniles consume fruits and nuts that have fallen to the ground, as well as other types of terrestrial flora. This specimen's leg and torso muscles are underdeveloped compared to those in their nose, so they lack the strength to maintain their posture and easily lose their balance. A type of primitive organism called a protochordate. Is that a real thing? An informal category of animals that describes invertebrate animals that are closely related to the vertebrates. And there's another word coming up here I don't know. In its juvenile state, it has a skeleton-like structure called a notochord, a cartilaginous skeletal rod supporting the body in all embryonic and some adult chordate animals. The more you learn. I gotta say, Olimar, for someone who does this as like a hobby, you know a lot. It flaps its fin tail to move and lives within other creatures' eggs as it grows. As its body develops, it starts to exhibit mollusk-like qualities, but its highly exposed external stomach can directly digest prey on contact, and it can also be used for locomotion. A member of the Gulix family, this primitive life form is made up of a single cell, which is quite odd given its size. Its nucleus is shaped like a bulbous star, and individuals move by using the fin at the end of its flagellum-like tail to quickly expand and contract its gelatinous body. If the nucleus is removed, its soft body loses all structure and splatters, but as long as the nucleus is still alive, the Gulix can return to its original form. Usually the Fulus will mimic nectar and wait for its prey. Its shell, which includes fire-extinguishing fluids, will then expand to capture and feed on unsuspecting organisms. Due to a common phenomenon known as imprinting, this baby will recognize anything that it sees or hears within a given length of time after it hatches as its parent, and consequently follows it around. Oh, didn't we hatch one or two and they just tried to kill us? However, the downy snagger has two specific conditions for imprinting. Oh. The first is that the target must be tall and blue, and the second is that related to the sound of its cry. This means it will never make a mistake with something as small as we are, and will instead recognize it, or us, as food. Never mind, sorry, I shouldn't have questioned you. Since it is still a fledgling, the downy snagger does not go underground to feed. Instead, it stays on the surface where there's plenty of food. It looks harmless enough, but beware, its parents may be hiding nearby until the baby is old enough to fend for itself. Speak of the devil, the majority of snagger species lie in wait to ambush and capture prey, with a body type perfectly adapted to such sudden strikes. I love the way the animation is very faithful to the way it's animated in the older games, even if they've changed the design a bit. It violently attacks small, surface-dwelling insects. Distributed across a relatively wide range, subspecies of snagger suited to the varying soil conditions have emerged, making the snagger the most geographically represented species besides the bulborb. Visually resembling the burrowing snagger is the burrowing snarrow, the range of which partially overlaps with the snagger's range. While the two may appear similar, when pulled from the ground, they can be distinguished by their presence or absence of tail and wing markings. Wattlequaff! It's just such a fun thing to say. Its overdeveloped respiratory muscles allow it to suck in large volumes of air through its long, thick beak while feeding. Its feathers are too small to use for flying. The current theory is that this is due to its niche position in the ecosystem as being quite secure thanks to the lack of natural predators and little competition for food in its habitat. However, with the expansion of Pikmin territory, recently its numbers have been gradually declining. Related to bivalves, they already used the word bivalve and I forgot how to say it and had to look it up. I'm just going to say bivalve. It uses its internal muscles to dexterously manipulate its upper and lower shells. This ability allows it to squash eggs in small ambularidices like Pikmin, and thus returning nectar to the ground, and it then feeds off the microorganisms and moss that benefit from the nectar. To further facilitate the growth of its food, the scorch cake will secrete oils from its body through its shell and onto the ground. It then sets that area on fire, perhaps as a way to improve soil fertility. This species has muscular organs that can create electricity by using... Sorry, I've been doing this for a long time, so now I'm starting to stammer hard. I could never ever narrate nature documentaries, apparently. Although I'm obviously speaking faster than you would normally want to narrate a nature documentary at, because I'm trying to get it done quickly. They can create electricity by using ion gradients within densely layered rows of electricity generating cells, which are arranged in an asymmetrical series. It uses its plug-like protrusions to instantly shock its prey and then squashes it. The squashed prey acts as a fertilizer, improving the quality of the soil so that the microorganisms and moss that the shock cake feeds on can thrive. By emitting frigid air from one side of its shell, it can freeze and squash any prey that approaches too closely. Food can be hard to find in extremely cold climates, so one theory is that this species has developed some kind of mechanism that allows it to store its prey for long periods of time. This is an example of a young bulboid body that's been infected by fungal filaments. Now it's a host. Now a host, it unconsciously continues to seek out and ingest food, all the while scattering large amounts of spores to the spore sacs on its back until it can no longer move. After all host body activity ceases, the specimen can mutates into a fungal culture that will eventually become a juvenile tox tool. Both the nervous system and slime-producing organ of the specimen have been invaded by fungal filaments, which is why it scatters spores as it moves. It will also shake spores onto other creatures, thus infecting new hosts and expanding the tox tool's habitat and range. Once the host body ceases to function, it can no longer serve as a fungal culture medium because its bodily fluids dry up and the corpus shrinks. At that point, the host body is abandoned. Yes, we observe that when you take them out, they shrink. A species of terrestrial snail located in flammable mucus instead of the traditional shell. The creature stays lubricated through the constant secretion of mucus that the fires never reach its skin. The most fascinating aspect of these creatures is their instinctive ability to avoid causing widespread fires by carelessly brushing plants. Except when lured into them, apparently. The hair covering its face works as a capacitor. It charges electricity by rubbing the hair to build static, and then discharges it at enemies intruding on its territory. It's more territorial than aggressive, attacking only when threatened rather than to hunt prey. It has several qualities unique to this ecosystem, such as breastfeeding its young, which someday may give rise to a whole new taxonomy of fauna here. Oh, there are not that many other mammals, I guess? The imbalanced asymmetrical arms of the Mamuta are among its most notable features. Feeding on its seeds and fruit, the Mamuta is known to actually sow and grow plant species. While other species have exhibited seed-bearing behavior for the purpose of storage, the Mamuta is the only species so far known to actually cultivate fields of plants. I believe that is a verbatim one for Pikmin 2. Its needle-covered armor is soft and quite exposed. Furthermore, it has a cowardly disposition, so when it senses even the slightest danger, it shoots out spikes. Regenerating new spikes requires significant amounts of caloric energy, so this creature requires significant amounts of food. This likely explains why, when it scrunches through garbage, it sucks up not just the insects it finds, but also the trash itself. They've adjusted a few of the SS Dolphin's parts too, but those could never be mistaken for trash. I don't think that's in the other games, because this is a new creature to this game, but that line sounds familiar. This floating life form drifts effortlessly on the winds. Upon death, its physical structure instantly collapses, and as the creature is particularly elusive and difficult to catch, no samples of specimens have been acquired as of yet. If we could simply recover a live specimen, research in this species would likely proceed much more smoothly. That is also verbatim, I believe. This species of blowhog uses internally generated hydrogen to inflate a flotation bladder and hover above the ground. The creature's electrified pulse creates a sash of color that flows along the surface of its body, making it a particularly beautiful species in the blowhog family. Precisely how it is able to internally stabilize its highly explosive hydrogen and simultaneously generate electricity remains a mystery. The puffy blowhog blows leaves and grass around to eat the insects underneath. It maintains mid-air buoyancy by using its fins and releasing air through blowholes. This enables it to float effortlessly, even in the breeze. This creature possesses 3 lungs, an air sac used as its primary respiratory organ, a flotation bladder that gives it buoyancy, and a cold sac that stores cold air. Like the puffy blowhog, its buoyancy is a result of the hydrogen produced by its electrolysis. Its icy breath is condensed carbon dioxide, much like the snowy blowhog. Different species within the blowhog family have many features in common when you look closely at the structure and characteristics of their internal organs. The withering blowhog is a close relative of the puffy blowhog family, but its breath is significantly weaker. However, its breath does contain a petal withering plant hormone that causes flowers to instantly lose their petals. Although its breath has not been studied in detail, analysis of the chemical compounds involved hold great promise for the biotechnology sector. This native jellyfloat is indigenous to the region. Unfortunately, it is currently endangered as its habitat is being overwhelmed by hostile invasive species, like the Pikmin. Vivid pink coloration is the most noticeable characteristic of this floating life form. This invasive species is not native to the region, having appeared to have recently arrived on wind currents. Oh, maybe they're talking about these. The luminescent organs atop its head attract prey, which then sucks up and consumes with its lower orifice. Unlike jellyfish, the jellyfloat's tentacles do not have nematocysts, so there is no danger in touching them. The yellow wallyhop spawns in early spring, laying its eggs on low-hanging tree branches and shrubs growing in or near lakes and ponds. Such unorthodox amphibious behavior is a defense mechanism protecting the eggs from predation by blue Pikmin and water dumbles. The wallyhop's wild hopping near the shoreline in early spring is thought to be a method of driving predators away from the Walpole eggs. This magnificent specimen has remarkably bright coloration compared to the rest of the Amphitrooper family, as well as 3 lateral spots. This species seems to have lost some swimming proficiency with the evolutionary adaptation that granted it a greater jumping ability. The yellow woollyhop inhabits aquatic shallows and shows an instinctive drive to jump on and squash smaller creatures. It is believed that juvenile woollyhops were once carried by underground currents into caverns where they thrived in the dark habitat. This troglodytic species of woollyhops coloration results from the generations of cave dwelling and lack of sunlight. Comparative differences between the size and shape of this woollyhop and other species are thought to be the result of natural selection at work, choosing traits better suited to life in a subterranean environment. When squashing prey with its mighty leap, the chillyhop secretes a bodily fluid made up of ammonium nitrate, urea, and water. This causes an endothermic reaction that rapidly freezes its prey, making its attacks all the more lethal. After squashing the prey, it gets sucked up through the chillyhop's belly. And since the species can store its food in a slightly chilled state without eating it for a time, it easily adapts to environments where prey is scarce. It's widely believed that yellow woollyhops and other related species can continue to grow until they start breeding, but after that, their growth rate plummets. However, in safe environments, ones that lack natural predators, for example, some individuals of the species may forego reproduction altogether and continue growing until they reach gigantic proportions. Yellow woollyhops telomerase enzymes. Telomerase? Is this a real word? Telomerase is the enzyme responsible for maintenance of the length of telomeres by addition of guanine-rich repetitive sequences. So that's like genetics and stuff. Genetic materials. It's on like your DNA or whichever, right? I think it's been some time since I was out in high school. I thought I recognized the phrase telomere as being about cell structure and stuff. Anyway, it prevents their body cells from aging. Under the right conditions, it's not unusual for some individuals to reach over 50 years in age. A resident of freshwater pools and marshes, this aquatic creature regularly feeds on insects that land on the surfaces of the water. It shares a nearly identical skeletal structure with its close relative and terrestrial cousin, the bulborb. This may offer clues to its evolutionary origin and suggest that it only recently emigrated to an aquatic habitat. Many assume it's undeveloped due to its large eyes and lack of fins, but this is simply its normal fully grown form. Although its dorsal and ventral fins have atrophied, the long caudal fin helps to compensate for this. It can leap high enough out of the water to catch low-flying prey. The scales comprising the round patches along its sides are known to turn light pink during breeding season. Its hidden spikes evolved from scales that were once on its forehead. The prickle puff uses them to charge and chase off unknown creatures that enter its territory. Its liver and ovaries contain powerful nerve toxins accumulated from ingesting shellfish and algae with trace amounts of poison. These toxins not only function as alternative pheromones, but also seem to keep predators at bay. However, once it's dead, the Pikmin have no issues carrying this creature back to the onion, where the poison is broken down into valuable nutrients. Its eyes and stubby feet make it look like an octopus, hence the name, but it's closer in anatomy to a starfish. It sleeps during the day, but will stay alert for approaching predators, which it drives off by puffing itself up and releasing bubbles. Closer research suggests that the true purpose for the bubbles is to protect its eggs during spawning season. I have a feeling we're going to get another person who is going to have notes for us about these creatures. One of the people we know that needs to be rescued, I happen to know will have some things to say about them. So we'll be doing another episode like this, I suppose, in some time. I don't know if that person will have something to say about the treasures as well. Maybe only a few of them. A juvenile peckish crab. Small in its size, its right pincer is only half grown. Because of this, it often hunts by hiding underground and lying in wait for ambush its prey. Generally, crabs pass through the larval stages Zoe and Megalopa as they approach juvenile crabhood. Instead, a peckish crab is born with a body shaped like an onion, absorbing its nutrition through the ground and spreading legs as it grows. But perhaps it's a close relative of species in the Ambuloratices class, which are all like walking plants and stuff like the Pikmin. Its unnaturally large claw is used for catching prey, for self-defense, and most surprisingly, for its mating call. Most aspects of the Iris crab's life revolve around it, which may explain why they become fearful and docile when the claw is damaged. It would also account for the claw's remarkable regenerative capabilities, which can restore it completely in a single night. It is also known to blow bubbles when under attack, but this is a result of it venting from the wrong discharge valve when under extreme duress. Curious. Looking at the eyes and sickle-shaped legs, characteristic of squillas, one would think this is a squilla relative. In fact, it's a relative of the hermit crab. You guys know what hermit crabs are? The species, however, has migrated from seaside life into in a shell and instead inhabits burrows in the ground. While its legs appear sickle-like, they are pincers that have evolved into a fin shape. Maybe they know about the normal critters on planet Earth, and these mutated versions are separate from them, but the originals still exist somewhere. This beast feeds on small creatures that pass by its lair, dragging them inside to eat them. Its body is covered in a hard carapace and has extremely ferocious personality. It spreads its sharp-fanged jaws to catch its prey. It also cheats, and it makes you auto-target its face instead, which there would be no reason to ever do. The crested rumpum suffers from poor vision, but it uses the fine hairs on the lower part of its tail and the ball-shaped sensory organ at its tip to detect faint quasi-electrostatic fields emitted by other organisms. In short, it has other ways to sense its predators and prey. Using the pearl that takes shape inside its body as bait, this creature lures prey into its interior and traps within its shell to feed. It's also worth noting that this pearl may just be an amalgamation of outside materials that wrapped in a viscous gelatin exterior. On the frequent occasions when it cannot gather food for itself, this creature can also obtain nutrients from the symbiotic algae within its body photosynthesizes. For this reason, it can often be found with its mouth open on shoals or sandy beaches that get a lot of sunshine. This species of creature has yet to complete its evolution from bloom-cap boister to the more advanced ranging boister. Compared to the latter, this creature is substantially smaller. The fact that its mandibles do not protrude as significantly as the ranging boisters is due in part to the fact that it's like most mollusks, its vital organs are located deep within the creature's carapace. The flower-like appendage on its back is actually a gill. It prefers a watery habitat from which it can capture unsuspecting small prey with its sticky tendrils. I wonder if we're going to have to fight a ranging boister here, and if it'll work the same way as it does in Pikmin 2, where you have to like swap the characters constantly. All that is known about this creature stems from a few sightings deep underground. All reported sightings feature the same core set of details. A giant viscous form with a clear hazy sheen, not unlike hard candy. One theory holds that it may be the ectoplasmic incarnation of a psychic phenomenon, but as it is usually the case with such theories, it is very difficult to prove. All witnesses report being suddenly overcome with fear upon sighting the creature, approaching a state of panic and near insanity. In fact, every report contains an inordinate amount of extremely vague details, which has led to suspicions that exhaustion and fear have caused some simple natural phenomenon to be viewed as a living creature. Smoky Prog's body is constantly deteriorating, so collecting a living sample has proven difficult, and research into the species has progressed at a glacial rate. That sounds familiar to Pikmin 1. However, by examining the genes adhered to the Smoky Prog's eggs, it has been confirmed that they are in fact Mamuta eggs. Oh, I thought that was just a theory by fans. The discovery allows for the possibility that Mamuta that do not develop properly and hatch become Smoky Progs. If, hypothetically, a Mamuta were to remain above ground at night and absorb glow sap, that might impact the nutrient levels within its egg's yolk. That change could lead to the embryo's inviability or break down its enzymes. Then, maybe. As far as I can tell, Moss has been a leafling pup since birth, and some of her DNA resembles that of the Pikmin. This is the one point in which she differs from Ochi. When Ochi transformed from a standard space stalker to a leafling pup, I started to theorize that the Pikmin are, in some capacity, propagating their DNA in other organisms. That was what my theory was, that there was parasitic Pikmin at work. That's what the Bulbmen are. The phenomenon in which all those castaways, including myself, became leaflings was very likely to be caused by being absorbed into the onion. Perhaps that process was also some sort of Pikminification of the body. Pikminified organisms can't leave this planet, so the Pikmin may have been motivated to carry out this process in an effort to secure a permanent leader. Of course, this is all a theory. It would make some sense, because there's evidence that they tend to, even once you propagate the numbers a bunch, they tend to go right back to being not very good at survival once you leave. It's cool that Olimar gets leafling eyes in the bad ending of Pikmin 1. It looks a little different than it does in this game, but it's cool that they brought back that bad ending as like a major plot point in this one. Pikmin are of the Ambuloradicis class, which consists of creatures that exhibit both plant and animal characteristics. Pikmin will instinctively follow whoever places them on the ground, so it is quite common for them to form symbiotic relationships with another species or accept a leader of a different species, as it serves the goal of propagating their own species as a whole. The red Pikmin is the most common Pikmin species. It can be identified by the nose-like protuberance on its head and its highly aggressive behavior. It also has a few surprising and unique qualities. For example, its immunity to extreme heat and fire, despite the fact that it's a living organism. This can be explained by looking closely at its skin and muscle fibers, which are made up of a flame-resistant cellulose. It's generally believed that the Pikmin body was originally the root of a plant that has evolved over centuries, if not millennia, developing structures analogous to muscles, neural networks similar to those of a brain, and more. However, yellow Pikmin produce a perfect resistance to electricity, a force which actually poses extreme danger to other organisms. Oddly enough, this species of Pikmin actually seems to enjoy electricicity. Their flowers are even to bloom when they are exposed to an electric current. I mean, unless it's this thing's electric current, apparently. This fact that would lead to one to believe that their neural transmission methods are quite different than our own. The species often uses the ear-like lamellae on its head to soar to great heights and dig holes. What are lamellae? A thin, flat scale membrane or layer. I see. By which you mean to say they're not actually ears. This has been biology with Olimar. Xenobiology, in fact. The accepted theory is that Pikmin evolved from terrestrial root vegetables and so would be unable to breathe underwater and then subsequently drown. Yet the blue Pikmin possess a gill resembling a mouth on their head, which enables them to be active underwater. While on land, they leaf and flower like other Pikmin species, and they breathe through the stomata on their skin, indicating they must be naturally amphibious. Pikmin proteins on the surface of their body essentially perform the same photosynthetic process as cyanobacteria, for example, which is what gives them their striking color. This is cool because there were no Pikmin entries in the Piklopedia and the other games. You never got this kind of detail. So because the gill doesn't work on land, obviously, they breathe through stomata all over their skin. That's wild. So I guess like a frog, you probably couldn't pick it up. Like it wouldn't be able to breathe. This species is definitely a member of the Pikmin genus, but its body does not share any of the plant-like traits that Pikmin are known for. Instead, it's composed primarily of stone. Well, it's got the leaf. The stone is actually the chosen host for a parasitic subset of Pikmin species named Hermikmin. Similar to how a seed can sprout and push through the cracks of rock, the Pikmin's roots can stretch deep into the stone, storing its vital organs in an interior cavity that resembles a crystal geode. Because of the species displays characteristics common in parasitism, one could hypothesize that the rock onion and rock candy pop bud stockpile stone that will eventually host the rock Pikmin. Right, because how else would they? propagate them. The wings on the back of this flying Pikmin species closely resemble the wings you would find on a flying creature. It's possible that an ancient winged onion somehow absorbed a flying creature's DNA, which then resulted in the precursor to the winged Pikmin transforming into the species recognized today. If this theory is correct, then the onions might also be serving the role of the messenger, transmitting new traits and characteristics to their Pikmin. That's an interesting thought. Because the Pikmin, though the onion is certainly winged. Pikmin supposedly evolved from plants, yet there are also Pikmin species with bodies made of ice, known as ice Pikmin. How is this possible? The answer to this question lies in the fact that ice Pikmin are parasitic by nature, and the ice serves as their host, similar to the rock Pikmin then. I guess that's why what the Habe is in Habasaxum and Haba Glacius. The composition of this type of ice is predictably mostly water, but resembles a saline solution with faint concentrations of trace sodium ions, potassium ions, and calcium ions that function as neurotransmitters, which I presume is what also lets it stay frozen in certain environments. Interestingly, the ice exhibits no visual signs of melting or dripping when exposed to sunlight. This is due to its low temperature core, which continuously creates more ice in order to maintain a consistent size. White Pikmin are born through color changing process within white candy pop buds, which only grow underground. I guess this is telling us there are going to be no onions for these things. The poison within its body is a type of diterpene, alkaloid, similar to a toxin often found in certain plant roots. If ingested, it can lead to vomiting, respiratory distress, and complete organ failure, ultimately resulting in death due to cardiac arrest. Though strong, this poison also has medicinal uses, sometimes going by the name aconite. Hang on, I gotta look up all this. What is diterpene? A class of terpenes composed of 4 isoprene units, often with the molecular formula of, and I don't understand it. They are biosynthesized by plants, animals, and fungi, or fungi, however it's said, by the HMG CoA reductase pathway, with geranyl pyrophosphate being a primary intermediate. Did that clear it up for you? And is aconite a thing? Wolfsbane. Oh, cool. So the white Pikmin are as poisonous as wolfbane, which I believe can kill you. Or wolfsbane, sorry. The estimated lethal dose is 2 milligrams? Cheapers of aconitinite. 5 milliliters of aconite tincture and 1 gram of the raw aconite plant. So damn poisonous is what it means. I wonder if wolfsbane is as poisonous to other critters though, and if it then makes sense that other critters get poisoned by it in this game. Anyway, the Pikmin are ambularated disease and evolve from plants, but it seems some species retain more of their plant-based evolutionary heritage than others. Slightly larger in size, purple Pikmin can weigh up to 10 times as much as other Pikmin species, and when thrown to the ground, their impact creates gravitational waves that can actually warp space-time. It's astonishing. The density of their muscle fibers is also much higher than that of other Pikmin, allowing them to transport 10 times as much weight as their average-sized counterparts. Their rich purple color is derived from strong polyphenol antioxidants. Like white Pikmin, they are born from underground candy pop buds, and no related onions have been discovered so far. But I think somewhere underground deep among the relics of the past, a purple onion is waiting to be discovered. I sure hope so. Onion! Sometimes it lies dormant, much like a bulb, but dig it up, it's cool that it shows all the onions we have now, as well. Sometimes it lies dormant, much like a bulb, but dig it up from the ground and provide it with the right stimulus, for example, a good hard shake, and it will activate sprouting the 3 root-like legs. It serves as a role similar to a nest or an incubator for the Pikmin, absorbing pellets or the bodies of dead creatures for their nutritional value, and then propagating the Pikmin with the same color for itself. Onions also seem to greedily attempt to replicate certain characteristics of the matter that they are absorbed by combining with or absorbing other onions, sometimes of the same type. It's been confirmed that, just like Pikmin, an onion has muscle fibers in its body, and though it is unable to walk, it is capable of a small range of motion. However, when one breaks down the biological matter it has absorbed, a fuel similar to bioethanol is created. Onions spray this fuel out of the mouths of their underbellies and are able to fly using their flower-like propellers for stabilization. While it doesn't sprout or create Pikmin, this specimen is still a type of onion. A bulb like this one can be divided into 7 segments. It is highly nutrient-dense and contains strong energizing and analeptic effects. That's another word I gotta look up. This game is how I learned to read, by the way. Pikmin 2 was. This game and Pikmin 2 and Wind Waker were the 2 games, really. Chiefly of a drug, tending to restore a person's health or strength. Restorative. Got it. The compounds responsible for its characteristics smell resemble onion growth hormones. When absorbed by an onion, it fulfills a critical role in Pikmin proliferation by increasing the total number of Pikmin that can be withdrawn from the onion at a given time. Just like onions, it contains muscle fibers, but flower-like has no animalistic qualities to speak of. However, if you place one near an onion, it may start to move a bit as though it is trying to roll over, so it can be absorbed. Eerie. What looks like the interior of a flower is actually an insectivorous leaf that's developed into an organ. This organ releases a sweet scent from its central pistil, luring small insects into its interior and trapping them. The DNA of those captured organisms is directly absorbed by the plant's cells, which might indicate that this species is attempting to evolve at an astounding speed. But in most cases, the cells essentially self-destruct. The bud then releases Pikmin seeds of the same color the plant withers. Muscle fibers extremely similar to those of an onion were also found in the species, so one could hypothesize that a candy pop bud is an under or undeveloped onion. However, there aren't enough details to confirm this theory either way. Interesting that we only see these 4 here, only the ones that we have onions for. You'd think we'd be able to see the ones that are in caves that we've seen already, like the black, white, purple, and pink ones. Guess not. In the stem of the pellet posy, one can observe the muscle fiber unique to the half plant, half animal species such as the Pikmin and candy pot bud flowers. The pellet posy is a species that can be considered a close relative. Although the ability to crystallize nectar is unique to a small group of the pelletweed family, the fact that these plants reach maturity so quickly and that their pellets contain such high concentrations of the natural nutrients in the soil explains why the Pikmin and so many of the other native species are so reliant on these pellets for sustenance. Like the pellet posy, while nectar is its primary source of nutrients, this burgeoning spiderwort produces fruit with high amounts of a super spicy compound. Both this fruit and the pellet posy are part of the pelletweed family, but the spiderwort does not crystallize nectar because of the different fungi that parasitize its roots. Instead, it produces alkaloids that contain these extra piquant compounds. The alkaloids are then extracted and collected by way of the plant's fruit. Whether or not a plant produces super spicy or super sweet compounds seems to depend on the type of fungus with which it interacts. Although they've been named glow Pikmin, it's not entirely clear whether or not the species is actually a type of Pikmin. These creatures possess the same fundamental behaviors of Pikmin, like carrying things, propagating, and fighting. They also share special characteristics such as a leaf atop their head. They do not spawn from an onion, but a luminol, and they are only active at night or underground. During the day, they revert into seeds and enter a resting state. What's even more surprising is that they exhibit no signs of life. When a glow Pikmin dies, if that word can even be used, it does not expire in the typical sense. Instead, it just becomes a form of light, or perhaps a photon, and returns to the luminol. Putting aside my scientist hat for a moment, it seems to me that this creature or entity may not be a living organism at all, but some manner of spiritual substance. I thought you said you didn't believe in all that. Besides the fact that they serve as incubators and nests for glow Pikmin, we know very little about the luminol's ecology. When nocturnal creatures die, a luminol can break them down into glow pellets through its strong dissolving enzymes. That's what they meant before when they were all... It lures creatures towards it for the pellets. This matter, when condensed, becomes glow sap. One might assume that glow sap is then an extremely dangerous substance, but it hardly has any negative effects. In fact, I've had it administered to me personally as a curative medicine to break down growing leaves. Luminols will only appear in places where an onion is located earlier in the day, and since they propagate with glow Pikmin, one could surmise that they are rhizomes from those onions. Like a mutate, I guess is what he means. Using its dissolving powers, it returns the nectar that supports the ecosystem back to the soil. Well, they're not always right in the same spot where the bases were. Rhizome. In botany and dendrology, a rhizome is a modified subterranean plant stem that sends out roots and shoots from its nodes. So no, maybe it's not. He wasn't just saying mutant. He's saying that it has a network underground. And that was the end. Back to the beginning. Oh, marvelous, because my throat really hurts now. Well, I guess that's all for today. Sorry, I thought we would be getting to OLIMAR's thing there, but turns out I way underestimated how long it takes to read things, but I really want to try out this OLIMAR shipwreck tale thing later. I'm like so eager to see what it is. The suspense is killing me. Whoa, what's with all these side quests reading new? Oh, well, I guess some of these are just ones that we... Right, no, okay, that's normal. Oh my god, I never even noticed I could hop up on this rock here. This is a lovely place to end this. So that's all for now. Next video on the channel is gonna be some more Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, where we just said goodbye to our old friend Reiju, and we are back on our road. So it's gonna be another traveling episode where we're just going into the Great Blue Yonder, running into threats and treasure alike, relishing and steeping ourselves in our adventurous spirit, much as Olimar would be proud of. So that'll be a good time. And that was all for this side episode. Depending on how long the shipwreck tale thing takes and how much progress it constitutes, like if you get any interesting rewards from it, or if it's just a fun little side thing. Tomorrow might also be, or next Pikmin's episode, 4 episode, might also be classified as a side episode. I hope it's tomorrow, but I haven't been nailing the everyday schedule of late, for which I apologize. That's all for now, though, so thank you so very much for coming around. Hopefully I will see you around. Admiral's gonna be out of here now. Peace! You can only have 12 characters max. It is noting how many characters we have in it, which is a bad sign. Oh, that's a floodlight. I thought it was a very blurry sign. Oh, let go of it. Okay. Oh, this would be so much easier if it controlled right, but very impressive feat of programming that they were able to